feel weird at all. That's great. Not even nervous. So when I started teaching about 10, 11 years ago now, I really thought that I knew just about everything I needed to know about teaching. I'd read literally hundreds of half of books about education. And it's always the most important stuff in the front half, so I felt like I was probably going to be pretty good. I'd interviewed, I'd gotten a job, I'd cultivated a fashion sense that only the profession of teaching could embrace. And I felt like I was ready to go, and then realized once I got into my classroom that I'm actually a really, really white guy. And that I didn't really know anything about that or anything about what that meant in my classroom. And so I kind of turned around and realized that as white as I was, most of the teachers I worked with were, if possible, even whiter than I was. And so I didn't know where to learn, and it took me a second to remember that I had in front of me an absolutely unbelievable amount of knowledge and wisdom in my students. And so I had to learn to listen to my students, especially as I became more and more convinced that I didn't just want a good classroom, I didn't just want a fun classroom, but I wanted an actively anti-racist classroom. And I don't think that I have to convince anyone that racism is bad. But I do feel like there's a lot of convincing that needs to happen in schools of why it's important that we are actively anti-racist in our work. And it's because there really is no neutral in school buildings. Schools are built so fundamentally to privilege white students and so fundamentally disservice our students of color that if we are not actively building our space to be anti-racist, that our neutral class actually ends up pushing the bar even further towards harm that's already being done. So that's kind of where my commitment came from, was as I started to think about and realize that. So I started to, again, listen to my students. And one student in particular is pretty impossible not to listen to. I had this young woman in 8th, 10th, and 11th grade, and we are somehow not at all sick of each other. And so I thought if I'm going to talk about student leadership that I would introduce you to a brilliant student leader that can talk about the work that we've done together. And so a now senior in high school and captain of the volleyball team, give a very, very warm welcome to Arrieanna Whitley. You got it? All right.
Hey, y'all. Hey, how y'all doing? I'm good.
We are going to cause trouble up here.
Y'all gonna love us. Y'all gonna love us. It's gonna be cool.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Whitley's 10th and 11th grade year, which are years that... Is it me?
I don't know.
It might be yours. It might be your hand on the thing, yeah. Might do it. Which are years that I really figured out, or tried to really figure out what I was doing in the classroom, and finally realized that maybe these problems weren't going to get fixed with a white dude talking a bunch at the front of the room. Which is pretty much how your 10th grade went, I think.
Yeah.
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 So I'm an English teacher, and I was teaching Othello, and really thought I did a great job. I still think I did a great job teaching Othello. But I wanted Othello to be an anti-racist unit, and so we looked a lot about how the characters interacted with each other, and that was a place that I introduced concepts like misrepresentation and marginalization and dehumanization to students. And we talked about not just the play, but the history of how that play was performed, which led into discussions about blackface in media, a lot of really, I think, deep and interesting things. But what it was a lot of me doing what I'm doing right now, right? Which is just talking, right? Students were receivers of anti-racist ideas, and I gave and they listened. So, Whitley,
Yes.
one of my goals when I was doing this was trying to make it clear to students right off the bat that race was going to be on the table in my classroom. So for you, what does it mean as a student when you are in a classroom and you realize that that you have a teacher that is ready to talk about race with his class?
Well, seeing that Othello had happened in 10th grade, what kind of hit me is the fact that it took all the way to 10th grade to talk about my skin tone, you know? And you would think that growing up, you know, you'd be growing up just as a kid, you know, not really worried about your skin tone, but come to find out as you get older, you know, your skin tone plays a bigger factor than what it is. And when you brought up Othello and all the different terms and everything, it kind of hit me hard because it's like reading the play, you know, looking back on my history, we came from kings and queens and princes and everything to see that even as far back as to when Othello was written, that it's quick on how fast you can become a king and a queen to a slave.
You see why I invited Whitley? And how did you feel? Do you feel like me trying to step back and doing like the vocabulary words, those big, like the big ideas of misrepresentation, was that important or?
I think it was super important because now here I am. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a poet, and here I am now, you know, learning more and more about the complexion of my skin and how important it is and how much it matters that I'm a 17-year-old black girl trying to make sure that my race is still up there, you know, because now with everything that's happening, everything is, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but you guys know what I mean. It's been a lot happening with people of skin of color. So I thought those words was very important because now they're starting to come up a little bit more in everything that you see, whether it's hidden or it's subliminal, you know?
Nice.
So.
And I think, so you bring up a good point, which brings us to your 11th grade year, so last year, which for I think a lot of educators and a lot of people in schools was dominated by the Black Lives Matter movement and by everything happening in Ferguson. And so the day before our Thanksgiving break last year was the day that Darren Wilson was not indicted for the shooting of Mike Brown. And I came in that day ready to talk about podcasts because I'd learned slowly. And a lot of my students just on the way in the door were coming to me and saying, like, are we going to talk about this today? Actually, I should be real. My students were coming to me saying, we're talking about this today. And so we ended up just pulling a bunch of furniture out of a room and making a big circle. And so just like you were saying, right, we took a lot of in 10th grade, maybe we were looking at it from a distance as much as we can. Shakespeare is about as far away from us as we can get without it totally losing all meaning. But we could so kind of talk about it like a subject. Now suddenly what I had in my classroom was a lot of students that were sharing in the process. So if Othello was anti-racism delivery, this was us sharing in this process and students kind of really getting to share their history and their story in my classroom. And it ended up being a really like kind of defining thing for the rest of the year. So what's that like to be, because you definitely shared, and you shared some real powerful truths in my room last year.
Yeah.
What is that like to do? Like, especially in a school, in a class setting, to kind of speak your truth in that way?
I think it's amazing, to be honest with you. Honestly, I think my school, as far as fair and then you, is more open to switching the curriculum or just switching the day out really fast. So I thought it was super cool that we're able to take something so powerful and versus pushing it back like 99.9 of America do, we actually be that 0.1% and bring it into light and we talk about it. And it just, you would think that, me being as young as I am, that I wouldn't really be going through so much or, being treated or privileged or misprivileged so much just because of my skin tone. But I'm only 17 and there's been a lot more that I've been through than maybe you have in your X amount of years as a,
X,
but you know what I'm
X amount
saying.
of years, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember, are there any days that really stick out to you from last year that you really carried with you?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I talk a lot, you guys. I talk a lot, and I don't want to say I don't have a filter, but when it comes to me speaking my truth and something I care so passionately about, I don't have a filter. So there's been multiple days, and it's like there's so many that I can't pick which one besides our final is the one. But
So
I know
we're gonna skip to
to
that. We can.
I mean,
skip
no,
to
we
that.
can slowly creep. Let's creep. We can creep on. We can creep on up there.
I'm trying to think of just throughout the year, it really was a progression where kind of as new things happened, as new ideas happened, I'd put a new writing piece in front of kids or a new idea in front of kids, or we'd watch an interview on CNN or something like that. And oftentimes I realized more than anything else, those served as triggers to get kids talking and sharing and involved. And so one thing I thought was really cool last year was how much my class became part of the wider conversation. So during that first day when we had that circle, there was just so many amazing things that were being said in my room, and so many powerful and just moving things. And one student was like, "Oh, we gotta," the obvious reaction to someone saying something cool is they were like, "I gotta tweet that." And so to keep my kids from doing it, I was like, I got it. I'm going to write all these down, and I'll start tweeting them as the day went on. And, all of a sudden, you guys were being written about. The Huffington Post wrote about you, and, the AP wrote about you, and the news come in. And it wasn't, it was nothing that I said. And, in fact, I really kind of resisted getting interviewed at all about it, because I was like, I didn't do anything besides, the circle of chairs looked very nice. It was super symmetrical and good, and I'll talk about that. But beyond that, it was letting you guys speak, and all of a sudden realizing that a lot of people wanted to listen, and that kind of kept going. I felt throughout the year. You look like you remembered one.
Well, just the whole able to see my school in the newspaper, and just to know that my school isn't very big, and just to know that I was part of something that was able to make headlines, that was able to make news and have people talk about it, and hashtags, and just everything was one of the coolest things ever. And it made me realize my voice will be heard whether you like it or not.
Speaking of, so there's if you notice, right, we're on a path here where I started in the center of the room and then started to back up a little bit, started to give kids more and more space. So Whitley mentioned the final last year, and the final last year was really interesting because it was the first time in a lot of years that I could say I lost complete control over my classroom.
That was my
and
fault.
it was definitely your fault.
Guilty.
So my thought with the final was there had been two really big pieces that had come out talking about kids of color in Minnesota, especially students in Minnesota. And one was this really great, really positive piece by Leanne Stevens, who's the best person in the whole world and a teacher in St. Louis Park. And the other was an article in the City Pages about Harding High School. And that's what I have to say about that. And I presented both of those articles to my kids, and I thought a really good end of this year, I have to throw out there, they did do final essays. You did do a final essay, right? Okay, they did do final essays. So this was kind of a wrap-up final, like, so you guys were legit, you were there, but I was like, I want to bring some stuff together of what we've done this year. I want them talking about this. I want them looking at bias and interesting stuff like that. And for a couple class periods in a row, that's what happened, and it went really, really well. And then Arrieanna Whitley came to class. And why don't you...
Okay, this is literally my highlight of last year. So, we all hate finals. I know you as teachers too. I mean, don't lie. You guys hate them. But that's not even the point. Honestly, anything that had to work out with Mr. Rad was a pleasure to actually do the work for, because, you have those classes that's boring, but then you have those
That's
classes.
the kind of stuff you say after the year's over, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, we had this final, and we were supposed to come in, and we were supposed to read these 2 articles, and we were supposed to write your feelings and emotions out on paper, which is what I do, but this one took a completely different turn for me. So it was this lady, and she was talking, what was the high school? Or what was the
Is it
school?
Harding in St. Paul?
Harding High School. And I don't remember this lady's name, and it'd have been really nice if she was in here, but we're just not gonna. So she was in here, and she was writing this article, and she was just so many derogative terms about the difference between, how one thing that stuck out to me the most, I'm sorry, I'm a little stuttery. One thing that stuck out to me the most is there was a kid who was walking down the hallway with his earbuds in, violently rapping music. And I thought about, how do you violently rap music? So I'm, going through the images in my head, and I'm like, that's not right. You can't just violently rap. I mean, you can, but that's... So then as you go on towards this article, you see that there's a lot more just terms that's just not making sense.
I remember one particular one, because it started so basically, like, Whitley basically stopped the whole class at that point.
Yeah,
it was just
did.
like, anyone who's reading the other article needs to come on over
And read
this article, because I don't like how we are being talked about, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, that was when, like, the wheels came off. And the kids they grabbed that article, and one of the lines somewhere near the beginning was something about his job was to tame the students. Remember? Yeah. So they started the hashtag "We Will Not Be Tamed."
Yeah.
You started the hashtag
That
"We
was
Will
me,
Not
guys.
Be Tamed." Yeah.
So, you guys can clap if you want. But to make a long story short, you guys, we never ended up writing an essay that day. That day, I told my classroom that we will be tweeting directly to the woman who wrote this article, quotes and depicted parts of her article to her. And our hashtag was #FairFinal. And with that hashtag #FairFinals, that way we was able to see everything that everybody was saying, and it was amazing. And Mr. Rad just kind of sat there, and he was like, well, he would try to regroup. He would let it go, try to regroup, and then he was like, you know what? Go ahead.
I was sitting there thinking, they're not going to fire the teacher of the year.
True. Well.
But I'll tell you, like, from where I sat, right, those kids showed absolutely everything I could have dreamed they would have learned, or learned that I think they already knew how to do, right? But they learned that they could do it in my room that day. And not only did, like, they tweeted, and it was involved. It was a thing that they started, a movement they started, and it was all about them. It was authentically about them. But also, they didn't do anything more than really quote lines from the article that already existed, right? And that was a decision that I watched you make with your classmates, when classmates were like, we want to really go in on this thing, and we want to, I'm sure they would have been very colorful and creative tweets. And I kind of watched you pull that group together and be like, look, if this is going to be impactful, right now, the best way to do it is to like take away all the noise and just like be a mirror for what got said, and know that these are students that she is talking about, putting these lines that were put right back to them. And so like, and it was super, super impactful just to grab those little snippets. And so that's really what I mean. Like, that was leadership. That was tremendous leadership. And it was active anti-racist leadership. That was my students 100% not letting the world be messed up anymore without saying something about it. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have a last thought?
I mean, honestly, I just do want to thank you for being, my teacher. We can get a little sentimental for a second because I know you hate it, but it was cool, and I do appreciate it, and I appreciate you being one of few teachers, let alone few of white teachers, who was able to show me what my melanin meant to me, and not any of the colored teachers I had before, and being able to hear your students, basically. And I really appreciate that, because now look where I am today.
I love that,